quick context, this was recorded March 28th and 29th, so a couple of weeks ago at my live event, SaaSOpen.com. We had 1,000 software CEOs there. If you missed it, we hope to see you at the next one, September 5th and 6th in New York City, SaaSOpen.com. But for now, let's jump into the recording.
Microsoft was customer number one. Yeah.
Over 100 million in revenue so far?
Yes, that is
over
correct.
150?
Yeah. Can't say that. Yes.
Over 125, can you say? How many of you have used Stack Overflow?
All right. Awesome.
Of those of you who have, who even knew that they had a SaaS product? One person. Literally one person.
It's good. A long way to go.
Meanwhile, what percentage of revenue is it now?
It's now about 60% of our company's revenues.
And the SaaS product, so for those of you who didn't raise your hand, Stack Overflow has a collection of sites that every developer you know goes to figure out the problems that they're wrestling with. Fair?
Yep.
Question and answer, other developers helping each other. What is the SaaS product then?
Yeah, so I think our community, which is about 100 million people that show up every day to our website, come because we have about 60 million questions and answers on every possible technology topic. So many of you who have used the platform over the past 15 years contributed to that or consumed content from that, and it's become the most trusted destination for all things technology knowledge. So that is, I think, a very, very important foundation. The SaaS business, very early on in 2018, late 2018, so very large companies like Microsoft came and said, we love using Stack Overflow, but we just want to use it inside our company because the same mechanisms really we would love to have internally for proprietary information, et cetera. So we want a private version of Stack Overflow for our company to use. So that really what initiated the SaaS business, oddly in the enterprise, with one of the world's largest companies today. Microsoft was customer number one. And then we went from enterprise down to where we are today, which we've now got 15,000 customers leveraging Stack Overflow for Teams.
So employees of Microsoft get to ask questions of each other, and they are the only ones who get to see the questions and answers.
That is correct.
And how much do they pay for that?
They pay, I won't say specifically Microsoft, but generally speaking, it has multiple tiers. So the enterprise tier is anywhere, it's close to about $18, $19 or so per seat per month. So it's just like any other SaaS software that you would establish.
So before we got started, I walked around. I met as many of you as possible to get a sense of what you're here for. What I understand that you're here for is two things. One is to meet people, which you're going to get to do throughout. And the second one is actual tips, techniques that you can use to grow your SaaS, your company's revenue. Before we do, let's talk about what revenue is now. Is this accurate, what we see up on the screen?
No, it's a couple of years old. So, this is, you folks, you're good researchers and folks who actually went and pulled it from any public information. But we're growing pretty quickly. I think in the context of our...
Forgive me.
Yeah.
Over 100 million in revenue so far?
Yes, that is
over
correct.
150?
Yeah. Can't say that. Yes.
Over 125, can you say?
Wow, that's backing me into a corner. It's certainly over 100 million.
That's fair to say over 125 though, right?
Maybe. Yes.
All right,
yes,
so if it's over, over 100 million,
yeah.
What percentage comes from this new SaaS product?
So over 60%, we have about probably close to now 70% of our company's revenues are recurring, and they were actually they were not recurring revenues when I started in 2018.
Meaning advertising. We would go to these different sites, there'd be an ad at the top, that's where the revenue was coming from. Now it's subscription, mostly.
Correct.
It's from the SaaS product, the internal question and answer site that you developed.
That's right.
Partially from the AI stuff that we'll get to later.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so for the first 11 years, as Andrew mentioned, we were almost entirely an ads business and a talent job listings business. Some of you may have consumed that product in the past. And then in 2018, 2019, the whole goal was to pivot the company to focus on SaaS, and for various reasons.
All right, let's talk about why.
Yeah.
What was the company going through that made you say, hey, we've got a successful business, we got to shift? There was a challenge. What was it?
Yeah, I think, we've got an iconic set of founders, Joel Spolsky and Jeff Atwood, who built Stack Overflow, an amazing platform. But, if you think about the audience actually doesn't care about ads. I mean, nobody loves ads, period. But especially for a technical audience, it's actually extremely annoying to have ads floating around.
Plus, we all have ad blocker.
Of course. So in that context, I don't think it was ever thought of as like this kind of perpetual revenue model in the future, and it was extremely episodic depending on the economy. People obviously cut down on ad spend when the economy is not doing that well and so on. So I joined in 2019, and immediately, the pandemic in early 2020 hit, and then we saw that very directly. We had talent job listings, people stopped hiring. So why would you actually put job listings? And then why would you actually advertise on the platform when your ad spend and marketing budgets are the first things to go? So that gave us kind of this moment of realization that maybe don't let this crisis pass, and let's actually double down on what I came here to do, basically, which is to convert and transform the company into a SaaS company.
And my fear was, anytime you have a content-based site that makes money from advertising, it's so easy for it to go to trash, to up the page views, to create ads that get more and more pushy, and the combination of all that would have ruined things. And so you said it's got to be SaaS. How'd you figure out what the SaaS product would be?
Well, I think it was primarily based on the user pull. I think a lot of the customers, like the Microsofts of the world, when they came and said, hey, this is what we care about, the early version of the product was literally a copy of the public Stack Overflow, but obviously completely a private version of it, and just sort of tested in the context of these big companies. And then we said, okay, now actually we need to go build a proper SaaS product, and so let's actually go do all the things that is necessary to accomplish that, which all of you, I'm sure, know of. So that was the impetus. It was straight from our users, straight from companies saying we love the platform. Thousands of people within companies use Stack Overflow. All your companies, if you came from big companies, use Stack Overflow every day. So it is sort of already present in people's workflow. So the idea was, why don't we actually exist in the context of the company's workflow? Yeah.
All right, so we're going to talk about how you got your first customers, and then we'll grow on from there. But what I'm showing up on the screen is what you're charging is in the middle graph over there. That's the price per seat.
Yeah.
And you still do have a very healthy advertising business.
Yeah.
I'm a podcaster, been one for years. I actually wrote a book on interviewing, which
Nathan
kept up here. But you have podcast ads, you have banner ads, you have all kinds of ads throughout the network.
Yeah.
Okay. The very first customer you said was Microsoft. Where did you figure out? How did you get the first customer?
Well, I think it was the notion of them actually coming to us. So I think it was completely a user pull, a customer pull. You can't underestimate the power of your
Wait, they weren't coming
product.
to you and saying, how do we spend money with you? What were they saying?
The users basically said, look, we love to do this, but the thing was that when people were posting content on public Stack Overflow, that started getting people's attention on, what we actually want to make sure that this content is not posted publicly with
I mean, on a regular basis, they would say, we want to ask questions, but we can't have people outside of our organization give us the answer. Okay.
Or post it externally by accident, as an example. Because, if you're posting a piece of code from within Microsoft on public Stack Overflow because you want feedback, et cetera, that would be, I think, obviously a problem.
Here's my understanding from the conversation we had before we got started. You looked at the people who are using the free version of the site. You said, what organizations are we seeing come up a lot? Let's go talk to them, right? Just put it in a spreadsheet or database?
In the context of like post customer 1 and 2, I think at that point we started saying, okay, let's actually think about every possible customer that is using Stack Overflow. So we actually had that very specific list of the largest users company-wise. And we typically went into companies and we said, you've got 2,000 users using Stack Overflow. And by the way, here are all the tags that they're using. They're using Python, they're looking up content on Python, they're looking up content on PHP. And by the way, here's why you should think about having an enterprise license with us. So it is very much a bottoms-up, tops-down, similar to a PLG motion, but this is more of a community-led motion, if you will, or CLG sort of motion that we went after.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of Microsoft.com email addresses registering.
Correct.
You go to the person at Microsoft.com who's the right person. You say, this is how many people are already on your network. Wouldn't you want to keep it private?
Yeah.
Great. You close some sales. You told me earlier about SDRs.
Yeah.
SDRs, sales development reps. What do they do?
Yeah, so obviously most SaaS companies have a great outbounding machine if you're actually good, and that I think is a foundational way in which you generate pipeline. So the motion of actually going and figuring out, hey, which company do you target and what do they actually use in terms of Stack Overflow, that whole work and actually putting out the outbound email or the call, that itself is the first initial activity. So I think it's just, this has been well documented over 15 years of, SaaS companies existing. You just need a machine to grow, and as long as they're productive in terms of generating, MQLs and SQLs and SQOs, et cetera, in the funnel, which ultimately will translate and convert at some level to pipeline, then you start building the predictability motion, which is obviously one of the foundational characteristics of SaaS businesses.
Meaning somebody registers with an email address, your system checks to see what company they're with, how big is the company, and if they're big enough,
Correct.
email goes out saying, can we have a conversation about how we can help you more?
That's right. That's in the inbound SDR process. The outbound SDR process is we're saying, okay, what are the big companies over 5,000 users that we can go after, and then in the context of getting them to pitch the product. And our SDRs go make those outbound calls and go do them systematically over a period of time, and then we measure that and we say how much of that converts into pipeline. Yeah.
Now, this is something that's being done by many companies. Anyone out here doing this right now? Have an SDR checking to see the email addresses of the people who are registering for your site, and then you are. Okay, so I'm seeing a couple of people here. For people who aren't doing it, what's a good way to get started? And then we'll talk about for people who are doing it, how to get better.
Start with one or start with two. That's what I would say. As long as they are able to be productive on their own, there's no difference.
You mean get one SDR?
Get one SDR.
To look to see the email addresses of the people who are coming in.
Yeah.
Use Clearbit or software to check to see who they are, and then start sending out offers to get on calls.
Correct. Basically get the first meeting, and I think that you can do that on your own, but it's probably not the best use of your time. So in the context if you're a founder, but you could probably get started by doing it yourself just to see, what is the traction if you're an early stage sort of founder. But then that really gets you to understand, okay, what is catching the attention of this prospective company or this customer? Are you actually solving the right problem for them? Is it high enough on their list, or do they care? And that gives you a lot of intelligence in terms of messaging, whether your product is relevant, is it must-have, is it nice to have, how much should you pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Okay, and then for the people who are doing this, what have you discovered about improving this process?
Yeah, I think the landscape evolves pretty quickly. So I think to be able to add capacity only and when you know that these SDRs are productive, that the intersection between SDRs and your account executives, I think that's a very important intersection, because if they actually work collaboratively and they align together on which accounts to go after, that cohesive relationship is super important. So especially as you have a bunch of AEs along with those SDRs. So that I think is like probably the most important relationship, the SDR and the AE relationship, along with the demand generation organization who are obviously driving campaigns, and you're doing all sorts of things on social media and LinkedIn and Google and all the things. But all that needs to come together between marketing, AEs, and SDRs. If it doesn't come together and it's somewhat of a disparate set of activities, you're not getting the biggest bang for your buck. You're probably actually being quite inefficient.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I did before we got started was I talked to people who are here in the audience. Sandy Robinson, who's a speaker who will speak later at the conference, said, talk about compensation. So when it comes to sales compensation, when it comes to SDR compensation, when it comes to even the CRO that you hired, how do you think about compensation?
Yeah, I think it's mostly pay for performance. I think you want to make sure that people have a base level of compensation on the base that people feel like they can pay the bills at a minimum level, of course, and that's important. But most of it's carrots more than sticks. I mean, it's really making sure that you have tremendous amount of accelerators, you have the opportunity to overperform, and you can make a lot of money as an SDR or an AE. But I think with salespeople, SDRs, if they're successful, they have a machine, they think about diversifying their pipeline with big companies and big prospects and middle scale, and then smaller companies, as we talk about the pebbles, rocks, and boulders combination. Then you've got the discipline and the predictability for them to start saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to plan ahead 3 months ahead so that I hit my base number. And then anything on top of that, if I hit a whale or I hit one of these bigger companies, I'm going to overachieve and my accelerators are going to kick in 1.5 times or 2 times. And then the most successful reps and the most successful SDRs will plan ahead, 2 quarters, 3 quarters ahead. And they have that machine going. So there's like a massive pipeline just building, and they're coming into the week with plenty of things to go do, and they're not starting from scratch. So I think, but you need a little bit of maybe a couple of months, 3 or 4 months of them to ramp, obviously, when they get started, to build the machine and to get going so the flywheel is running. But once you do that, then I think you're on your way. Yeah.
Are these your customers that we're looking at here? Siemens, Bloomberg, Microsoft?
That is
Intercom?
correct. Yeah, again, based on 2022, some of the numbers, and by the way, it's not spying, it's paying. But yes, that's correct.
But we're looking at $250,000 for an enterprise customer. How long does it take to close a deal with an enterprise customer that's paying that much?
Yeah, probably between 9 to 12 months for the largest strategics, like the Microsofts. The enterprise is probably closer to 6 months, and an SMB customer is probably anywhere between 1 and 3 months.
But you're going to the top and getting the deal with the company. You're not having them start to use it and then going into the company.
We've done sort of both over time, but as I've talked about already, 100 million people use Stack Overflow. Invariably, everybody within companies use Stack Overflow because they've used it as part of their work, historically. So that is, in many ways, our bottoms-up PLG motion, or if you think community-led motion. And so we leverage that as our bottoms-up motion, which is very similar to a lot of SaaS companies who provide people free trials and freemium offers, et cetera. This is our free offer, our public community. People have been using it. The same format exists, et cetera, in the private product. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So now the next thing that you told me that you did was you said, look, we started going after our existing users and seeing if some of them would get their companies to convert into the Teams product. Then you went into lead generation, you started building marketing assets, campaigns, messaging. What worked for you?
Yeah, I think having a very specific ideal customer persona, as many people here know, ICP, very important, making sure that the value proposition or what you're actually talking to them about actually solving an important problem for them, versus just shooting and spraying and praying and hoping that something sticks. But the more targeted you are to the people that actually matter, with the problems that you actually are going to be solving for them in a very crystallized fashion by leveraging your strengths, that whole process of
Wait,
combining...
this sounds very corporate-y.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? Like when you're saying that marketing has actually worked to pull people in, what's worked? Where do I see it? A lot of us here didn't even know that you had a SaaS product.
Yeah, that's fair. Branding, so clearly we've got to work on that one. But I would say the biggest thing that has worked has been the bottoms-up motion, along with engaging with the CTOs and the CIOs and VPs of engineering that we typically engage with, right? And the specific problems that they are trying to solve, whether that is transforming into the cloud, leveraging AI tools these days, or whether that is becoming more efficient with their developers, in terms of productivity, or if it's onboarding people during a time when they're hiring a lot of people very easily. How do you get people? You've got to zone in on the top 3 problems that they actually care about, and that messaging goes out very specifically to the personas that we care about, right? Specifically the CTOs and CIOs.
All right, I'm going to spend real quick just on partnerships, and then I want to get to AI because you've done some big things there.
Yeah.
Partnerships, you've got partnerships with Microsoft and others. What are they doing? How are they selling Stack Overflow Teams?
Yeah, so I think as part of the scale journey, we obviously started with our own user base. We went into these big companies. We built up an SDR team. We had a demand generation function that got built up. Then we had a more mature AE organization. And then we hired a lot of people who actually had SaaS backgrounds to go and kick off this entire transformation. And then we said, okay, at some point it makes sense to then engage with big companies as we think about big brother partnerships. We are a smaller company. We have somewhat of an outsized impact in terms of our user base. But we wanted to partner with who are the big ecosystem companies. So Microsoft is an example, one of the biggest companies in the space. We are very big partners of theirs. We actually engage with them in their Azure partnership area, if you call it, the ISP program.
I see.
And we align with their reps to be able to go and sell into accounts jointly. So that's another way for us to get the attention of a CTO or a CIO of a very large company. And so that is
They bring your salespeople in when they're making...
Mutually.
When they're closing.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, it has to be done mutually. Yeah.
Now let's talk about AI. Dude, when I was looking you up last night, the big criticism that I kept seeing was people aren't going to use Stack Overflow anymore because developers are already using AI as part of the software they're using. And you and I talked about what you did with Google Gemini. Can you talk about that? And then we'll talk about beyond.
Yeah, so I think our vision in an AI world is all about bringing together the power of AI and humans on the public platform. So you have this really high trust product and set of answers. So because when we went and did a bunch of surveys in our user base, 100,000 people responded and said, 70% of them wanted to use AI tools for software development or for something related to technology development. But only 40% of them trusted what was coming out of AI models because, hallucinations and all the things that you know about, which is absolutely the case. And so we said, our role should be bringing humans and AI together on our platform on Stack Overflow. What does that mean? It means humans do amazing things, creating new knowledge, validation of information. The whole community aspect. We've been in the upvoting, downvoting game for 15 years of reinforcement learning, if you will. And then you've got AI that does all the things we know about, summarization, semantic search, and all the things that you've read about. So bringing those two things together delivers highly trustworthy, highly accurate, highly attributed and cited information that are, again, they're leveraging Gen AI, and you're getting a Gen AI
on the platform.
Answer
and at the same time, you've made it a deal with Google's Gemini, where they can take data from Stack Overflow and use it to inform their AI and get links back as a way of having people see the sources, so that there's no concern about bad information being on there. Have you made a deal with OpenAI yet?
Can't comment on it yet, but we are.
But it's a possibility.
Absolutely. I mean, all the big AI companies, we went and basically got a bunch of inbounds from them when we announced our Overflow API program, which is basically to say, how do we make sure they're focused on responsible AI, so they're not just sort of scraping the web off of our web, which is what's been happening for the past several years.
Meaning they've been scraping your data without your knowledge and consent. Probably.
Historically, yes. But now when we saw that, we said, look, there's a responsible way of engaging with us. And so we launched this program called Overflow API. And the first company that basically engaged with us is Google. And so now all Stack Overflow content, when used within Gemini's AI capability, will show up in their AI tools with links to Stack Overflow back to the users who get attributed the work that, all of you, if you contributed to Stack, your names will show up when a Gemini answer is provided. And by the way, reputation accrues back to the user. If you're the best JavaScript programmer, your answer was used by Gemini thousands of times, and you get the credit for it.
What's the deal with? Did you make a deal with Anthropic?
We have many announcements coming, and you can expect some here in the next very short order, actually, with more than Google. So,
all right.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes.
Give him a big round.
Yes.
Hey folks, if we haven't met yet, my name is Nathan Latka. I launched and sold my first software company back in 2015 and went on to write a book about it, which you guys made a Wall Street Journal bestseller, purchasing over 30,000 copies. Thank you so much for that. After the book, I launched this show and went on to create FounderPath.com. I raised a large fund to do non-dilutive deals with B2B software founders. So far, we've invested in over 400 software founders, totaling $150 million. Here in 2024, we're doing 3 to 4 new deals per week. So if you're looking for capital and don't want to give up equity, go sign up at FounderPath.com for free to get your offer.